What's up guys, Jarv here, back today jumping into Destiny 2. In today's video we're taking a look at all the legendary weapons you should be chasing ahead of the Witch Queen, which launches on the 22nd of February. So if you want to make sure you have all the weapons that you need in your arsenal before jumping into the new DLC, then make sure to stick around and enjoy the video. If you do enjoy the video, be sure to leave a comment and rating down below, and remember to subscribe for more Destiny 2 content. But without further delay guys, let's jump into the video. Now before we jump into the meat of today's video, I want to first invite you all to our Twitch streams over on twitch.tv/Jarvenus. We stream over there now Monday, Wednesday and Friday and getting into all sorts of Destiny 2 shenanigans. So if you fancy chilling out and having a bit of fun, then be sure to jump over there and drop us a follow, and all the details can be found down in the video description below. Now jumping back into today's video, we're taking a look at all the legendary weapons you should be chasing ahead of the Witch Queen. Now in a recent TWAB, Bungie were able to reveal some of the champion mods for the up and coming season. This includes the Overload and Barrier, and what we could be using to take down unstoppable champions too. Now Bungie go on to say when it comes to artifact mods themselves, they're bringing back some fan favourites for anti-champion mods, things like anti-barrier scout rifles and bows. They've done some tweaking to make disrupting overload champions more consistent, and this will be for auto rifles and SMGs for the up and coming season. They'll also be highlighting the glaive as the new weapon archetype through Witch Queen using a variety of artifact mods, and also including that as a weapon for unstoppable champions too. So with that information in mind, let's jump into the weapons you should be making sure that you have ahead of the DLC. Now the first weapon in our list today is the Jury SR4. Now you can get this from the Nightfall or Grandmaster Nightfall, with the Grandmaster Nightfall exclusively dropping the Adept version of this weapon. It's the superior version, but having either of those versions will set you up for success when jumping into the Witch Queen. Now scout rifles were some of the most consistent when it comes to stunning barrier champions, and the Jury was no exception. Now if you're in the process of clearing out your vault, make sure to check if you have any with rapid hit or explosive payload. Explosive payload makes stunning barrier champions even more consistent than it already was, as this allows projectiles to create an area of effect detonation on impact, allowing for an even more consistent stun. In terms of overall weapon stats, they're some of the best across the board, and it's definitely a weapon you want to make sure that you have if you haven't picked one up already. Now another kinetic scout rifle to bear in mind is the Night Watch. Now once again, this also sits in the kinetic slot, however this one is a lightweight frame. Now if you haven't got your hands on the Night Watch, you can pretty much get one from the gunsmith by handing in gunsmith materials, or if you complete the New Light quest, you'll get the God Roll on this weapon and won't have to farm one at all. By completing the New Light campaign, you'll get access to an exclusive perk on this weapon called Overflow, which is where picking up special or heavy ammo reloads that weapon beyond its normal capacity. That is paired with extended magazine and also explosive payload, which as we've already covered is one of the most consistent when it comes to stunning those champions. Now if for any reason you have already completed the New Light quest and aren't able to go back and do this, and don't want to delete your characters either, as we said you can hand in gunsmith materials, however you won't be able to get Overflow. You can get rapid hit once again, which is where rapid precision hits temporarily increase your stability and reload speed, which is absolutely key in end game content. I personally prefer the Night Watch over the Jury, purely because the sights are far more or less intrusive and the scout rifle itself fires at a faster RPM. But either way, as long as you have at least one of these in your inventory ahead of the Witch Queen, then those anti-barrier combatants won't stand a chance. Now as for elemental scout rifles, we have a few choices. As for solar, Vision of Confluence comes out on top for legendary scout rifles. You can get this from the Vault of Glass raid, and if you can complete the Master Challenge, you'll also get access to the Time Loss version, which has second perks in the third and fourth column. In terms of perks you should be seeking out, things like rewind rounds and even Disruption Break can roll on this weapon. Disruption Break is very strong, especially in end game content. As for breaking an enemy's shield with the weapon, that makes them more vulnerable to any kinetic damage for a brief period, which is once again excellent for taking out those champions. As for arc scout rifles, we have the Eternal Blazon. You can get this once again from the gunsmith by handing in materials, or if you have Umbral engrams, you can focus these using the prismatic recaster over in the helm. And much like the Night Watch, this is also a 200 RPM scout rifle and lightweight frame. In terms of perks you can get and should be seeking out, this can in fact roll with things like Overflow and One for All, which is excellent for end game content. One for All is where hitting 3 separate targets increases your damage for a moderate duration, and when you pair that with something like high caliber rounds, which also rolls on this scout too, this will help stagger those champions, preventing them from regenerating those shields. Over 97% of players have had an Eternal Blazon, so be sure to check those vaults before dismantling any ahead of the Witch Queen on the 22nd of February. And when it comes to Void scout rifles, Vouchsafe is absolutely king here. This is also lightweight frame, 200 rounds per minute, and you can farm this from the Blind Well over in the Dreaming City. This was updated as part of the 30th anniversary pack, with weapons now dropping as guaranteed drops upon each Blind Well completion. Now Now, we made a video recently covering all the details on the updates to Blind Well, some hints and tips and strategies to farm this as fast as possible. If you haven't checked that video out, then I'll leave the link to that down in the video description below. Now, back to the Vouchsafe itself. Much like a lot of the scout rifles we've covered already, this can also roll with things like rapid hit and explosive payload. And as we've mentioned already, those are the go-to perks when it comes to scout rifles for end game content. 73% of players have had their hands on a Vouchsafe so far, so much like the Eternal Blazon, make sure to check your vaults before dismantling any ahead of the DLC. Now, moving on from scout rifles and looking at bows, the first one we're taking a look at is called Biting Winds. You can get this by completing the bounty from Variks over on Europa. Now, this bow is precision frame, so it has a longer draw time, which is optimized for damage. Now, whilst a lot of the scout rifles could have explosive payload, this one in fact comes with explosive head, where arrows explode after a short delay. And once again, pairing that with something like rapid hit makes this a very strong bow for breaking those barrier shields. 85% of players have had their hands at least on the Biting Wings up until now, so be sure to check those rolls, or if you don't have one, then head over to Europa and grab those bounties. Another alternative to the Biting Winds is the Arsenic Bite-4B. Now, this is a recurve bow that you can draw quickly and move faster while that weapon's equipped. Now, much like the Biting Winds, this does roll with explosive head, where arrows explode after a short delay. However, it doesn't roll with rapid hit. One of the great alternatives to rapid hit on this bow though, especially when paired with explosive head, is Dragonfly, where precision kills created elemental damage explosion. When you pair that with explosive head, you have a very strong bow in your hands indeed. 91% of players have had their hands on the Arsenic Bite-4B up until now, so it is well worth checking those vaults to see if you've got one gathering some dust. If you haven't, then this bow forms part of the world loot pool, so it's a little harder to farm than, say, the Biting Winds that we just covered. However, it can drop from pretty much any legendary engram in the game, so be sure to check those rolls first before dismantling any engrams ahead of the DLC. Now, if you're looking for a bow but can't be bothered to farm one, then the one I recommend picking up is called Point of the Stag. You can pick this up from the Monument of Lost Lights over in the tower in exchange for upgrade materials. This one is a precision frame compound bow with a longer draw time optimized for damage. Now, this bow has a fixed roll, so you don't need to farm it at all, and it has second perks in the third and fourth column. You can choose between No Distractions and Archer's Tempo in the first column, with Vorpal Weapon and Eye of the Storm in the second column. If you're looking for the go-to PvE role for endgame content, especially for barrier champions, then Archer's Tempo and Vorpal Weapon will be the perks that you should select. Picking this up from the Monuments of Lost Light will save you the time when it comes to grinding for a bow, and having Vorpal Weapon on a bow for endgame content, which increases damage against bosses, vehicles and any guardians with their super active, makes this a very strong weapon for those harder activities. So if you don't mind spending the surplus materials ahead of the DLC, then pick up this bow instead to save yourself some time. So that covers our weapon recommendations for barrier champions. Now we're going to take a look at overload champions and the weapons you should be making sure you have ahead of the DLC. Now, the first auto rifle today is the Gnawing Hunger. This is a legendary energy auto rifle, which is a void element, and you can pick this up from pretty much any source in the game as it forms part of the world loot pool. If you're handing in those gunsmith materials once again, then there's a high chance that you'll get one from the gunsmith over in the tower. Now, this is a 600 RPM auto rifle with some changes to overload champions, and the consistency when it comes to stunning them could be one of the go-to weapons when coming to stunning those champions. Now, in terms of the perks that you should be seeking out, especially if you're looking for harder content, something like Zen Moment would be good for console players, where causing damage with the weapon will increase its stability, or even auto-loading holster, where holstering the weapon automatically will reload that after a short period of time. Those are two very effective perks, especially in harder content. You can go for Rampage in the final column, which will increase the weapon's damage after a kill, which stacks up to 3 times, but it can be a difficult perk to proc, especially in harder activities. It can roll with Demolitionist though, where kills will generate grenade energy, and activating your grenade will reload that weapon from reserves. Getting that grenade energy in end game content is absolutely critical, and that could be a go-to perk on the Gnawing Hunger. 87% of players have had their hands on the Gnawing Hunger. It's been around for quite some time, has been reprised quite a few times, so be sure to check those rolls that you might already have in your vault, or even hand in those gunsmith materials if you don't have your hands on one already. Another auto rifle to consider that often gets overlooked is called the Number. This is a legendary energy auto rifle as well, however this one is of arc element. This also forms part of the world loot pool though, or you can get it by focusing Umbral engrams over at the prismatic recaster in the helm. Now, a lot of times I see this dropping and it gets instantly dismantled, but it's well worth checking those rolls if you see one between now and the DLC. This can roll with things like high caliber rounds, field prep, which increases your ammo reserves, as well as granting faster reload, stow and ready when you're crouched, alongside one for all, where hitting 3 separate targets increases damage for a moderate duration. Those are some very strong perks on a 450 RPM auto rifle which could make this a very effective weapon when it comes to stunning those overload champions. 98% of players have had their hands on the number, but very few have held onto one. If you think you have one in your vault, it might be worth checking it out and dusting it off. If you haven't, then be sure to refocus those Umbral engrams to see if you can get your hands on one. And the last auto rifle we're taking a look at is called the Last Breath. This is a kinetic auto rifle. You can get this from the Prophecy dungeon, which you can access via the tower. Now this is a 600 RPM adaptive frame, so it has a well-rounded grip, is reliable and sturdy, and this auto rifle has an excellent range of perk combinations available to it. It can rival things like ricochet rounds and high caliber rounds, which are once again great for those champions. In the second column you can rival things like Demolitionist, and in the third column you are pretty much sport for choice. You have things like Osmosis, where using your grenade ability will change this weapon's damage type to match that of your subclass until you stow it. Being able to have an elemental primary whilst having an energy and heavy weapon too is a very strong combination, especially for harder activities. So don't sleep on Osmosis if you can get it to roll on the Last Breath. Some other great alternatives though are things like Adrenaline Junkie, or even One for All, which also roll on this weapon. As you can see, there are some strong perk choices for PvE, and it's well worth chasing down if you haven't got your hands on one. Now the final archetype of weapon we're going to take a look at is submachine guns, and these are for overload champions too. Now one of the go-to SMGs going into next season is the Extraordinary Rendition. This is a kinetic submachine gun which is an aggressive frame, so it deals high damage but has high recoil. This was introduced in season 13, and you can gain access to this via the Umbral engrams and the prismatic recaster over in the helm. Now this SMG is often referred to as the legendary recluse, as it can roll with things like Overflow and Frenzy, which are very strong for ad clearing weapons. Now the stats on this weapon are solid across the board, but if you're looking for something that hits a bit harder, especially for those harder activities, then you'll be looking for something like One for All in the final column. Just by hitting 3 separate targets, you'll increase this weapon's damage for a moderate duration, making it even more lethal than it already is. Over 91% of players have had their hands on this SMG. It's extremely popular, so be sure to dust off those rolls if you have one, and if not, be sure to hand in those Umbral engrams over at the prismatic recaster to see if you can get the god roll ahead of the DLC. And the final weapon we're going to take a look at is the IKELOS SMG V.0.2. This is the reprised version of the original IKELOS SMG. This is a legendary energy weapon which is also an aggressive frame, and as things currently stand, forms part of the world loot pool. Now this SMG is owned by 86% of players and has some really interesting perk combinations on it. It has a unique perk called Seraph Rounds, where rounds over penetrate targets and bounce off hard surfaces, which is fantastic for champions. In the middle column, you're sport for choice. If you're looking for more accuracy and stability, then dynamic sway reduction is available, or if you're looking for faster reloads, then threat detector is a possibility. But it's the final perk column on this weapon where it really starts to shine. You are almost sport for choice. You can choose between Vorpal Weapon, Demolitionist, Disruption Break, or even Surrounded, which are all fantastic perks when it comes to PvE content. Disruption Break allows you to increase your kinetic damage for a brief period, and as for Surrounded, this is where the weapon gains bonus damage when 3 or more enemies are in close proximity. You can pair this with the Surrounded Spec mod, which further increases the radius of the proximity of those combatants. Any of those perks makes this an absolutely deadly weapon, so make sure to check those rolls if you get one drop between now and the launch of the DLC. So there we have it guys, 13 weapons in 13 minutes, and the weapons you should be seeking out ahead of the launch of the Witch Queen on the 22nd of February. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to check out one of the 2 videos you see here in these cards for more Destiny 2 content. And if you want to keep up to date with everything to do with Destiny 2, be sure to hit subscribe as well. I'm going to jump back into the game as always guys, and I will catch you all again very soon.